Israeli jets have targeted more than 10 towns in southern Lebanon as the ceasefire between Iran and the United States appears to be holding despite naval skirmishes near the Strait of Hormuz. Israel on Saturday killed at least 24 people in a wave of attacks, despite a ceasefire that took effect last month.
And an attack by armed rebels has killed at least 69 people in Ituri province in the conflict-torn northeast of the Democratic Republic of the Congo DRC, according to security officials. For more than 30 years, the mineral-rich eastern DRC has been a battleground for various armed groups, vying for control of its many mines.
Interim Syrian President Ahmed al-Sharaa has announced a series of government changes, including replacing his brother as head of the presidential office, the state news agency Sana reports. Al-Sharaa appointed former Homs governor Abdul Rahman Badruddin al-Amma as Secretary General for the presidency. The post was previously held by al-Sharaa's brother Maher, an appointment that had drawn accusations of nepotism. A large-scale Harvard-based study has determined that regular consumption of blueberries may be linked to slower cognitive aging and improved brain health in older adults. Researchers analyzing long-term data from more than 16,000 women in the Nurses' Health Study found that those with higher intake of blueberries and strawberries experienced significantly slower rates of cognitive decline compared to those who consumed little or none.
And a truck transporting oil from Karachi port to Sialkot was snatched near the Commander City housing scheme on M9 motorway in the limits of Nooriabad police station in Jamshoro district. Sajid Jamil, a manager of the goods transport company whose truck was snatched, lodged an FEIR at Nooriabad police station on Saturday, narrating that the truck was shipping edible oil to Sialkot, but it was robbed by 7 armed men who were travelling in a double cab.
Pakistan Telecommunication Company Limited, PTCL, has informed customers about a scheduled maintenance activity to repair a fault in one of its submarine cables. The repair work, which will be carried out by the International Cable Consortium, is scheduled to begin on May 11, 2026, and is expected to continue until May 18, 2026.
The Punjab Food Authority, PFA, has intensified its crackdown against the adulteration mafia in different areas of Lahore, sealing 8 food units, imposing fines worth 700 thousand on 5 outlets and discarding large quantities of rotten and expired food items over violations of food safety laws. The enforcement teams carried out operations in Iqbal Town, Inner Lahore, Multan Road and adjoining areas on the directions of Director General Syed Musa Raza. During the campaign, 11 food units were inspected, out of which 8 were sealed for serious hygiene and safety violations.
Israel deported on Sunday 2 foreign activists seized from a Gaza-bound flotilla in what a rights group representing them described as a punitive attack on a civilian mission. Saif Abu Keshek, a Spanish national of Palestinian origin, and Brazilian Tiago Avila were among dozens of activists aboard a flotilla intercepted by the Israeli Navy in international waters off the coast of Greece on April 30.
Sana stood outside the gates of the police station with her young son, clutching her hand as she trembled from fear of what people would say if she went inside. The 26-year-old had been subjected to 4 years of physical, emotional and financial violence at home, and now her husband was threatening to leak their private videos. What held her back was not fear of her abuser, but a sentence she had heard her whole life. Sharif Lakian Thani Nahi Jati. Good girls don't go to police stations. All passengers on the cruise ship hit by a deadly hantavirus outbreak are considered high-risk contacts as a precautionary measure. Europe's public health agency said ahead of the ship's expected anchoring on Sunday off the Spanish island of Tenerife, passengers without symptoms will be repatriated for self-quarantine via specially arranged transport, not regular commercial flights by their respective countries, the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control said on Saturday as part of its rapid scientific advice. Israel has deported 2 foreign activists who had been abducted from a Gaza-bound flotilla in international waters. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs says Saif Abu Keshek, a Spanish national of Palestinian origin, and Brazilian Thiago Avila were among dozens of activists sailing with the flotilla when it was intercepted by the Israeli Navy off the coast of the Greek island of Crete on April 30th.
And Aryna Sabalenka's French Open preparations have suffered a setback following a third-round defeat by Sorana Cîrstea at the Italian Open, and with the world number 1 now looking to shake off an injury before the Grand Slam that begins in less than 2 weeks, Sabalenka needed treatment late in her meeting with Cîrstea on Saturday before. She fell 6-2, 3-6 and 5-7 for her second defeat in 3 matches after a quarter-final loss to Hailey Baptiste at the Madrid Open last month.
In the early 2020s, the Belgian political theorist Anton Jaeger coined the term hyperpolitics. He noticed that in this day and age, politics seemed to be everywhere and in everything, but was not catalyzing any real change, at least not the way politics used to in the 20th century. The last century was an era of mass political activity, mass politics, driven by large political parties, unions, and macro ideologies. According to Jaeger, until the 1980s, political life was anchored by thick institutions that acted as a bridge between the individual and the state. But by the 1990s, post-politics had set in and replaced mass politics. Sean Strickland has won the Ultimate Fighting Championship's 185-pound championship for the second time in his career, defeating Khamzat Chimaev via split decision in a bout that never rose to the level of vitriol and threats of violence outside the cage that both fighters engaged in advance of the main event of UFC 328. Strickland won 2 scorecards 48-47, while Chimaev took the third scorecard at 48-47 in front of a crowd of 17,783 fans at the Prudential Center on Saturday. The cruise ship hit by a deadly hantavirus outbreak has arrived near the port of Granadilla in Tenerife in the Canary Islands. The Dutch-flagged MV Hondius arrived at the Spanish port early on Sunday, escorted by a civil guard vessel, according to data from the maritime tracking service Vessel Finder.
Banu, at least 15 police personnel were martyred on Saturday night after a suicide attack on the Pehel police post in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa's Banu district. The terrorists launched their attack on the post by ramming a vehicle laden with explosives.
And Islamabad, Pakistan. In Pakistan, May began with streets in major cities dotted with banners and posters honouring the military leadership that, in the official telling, and guided the country's defences and led the nation to victory in the 4-day aerial war with India last year. At the Nur Khan Auditorium in the city of Rawalpindi on Thursday, and the Pakistan Air Force held a ceremony marking its achievements in downing Indian jets. In Lahore on Friday evening, and a government-organised concert at the city's Liberty Chowk celebrated the conflict's success in what Pakistan calls the Day of the Battle of Truth.
French President Emmanuel Macron has started a tour of East Africa as Paris seeks to rebuild its influence on the continent after a series of setbacks, especially in its former West African colonies. Macron began the 3-country tour in Egypt on Saturday, which will also take him to Kenya and Ethiopia.
Daniel Dubois came back from 2 knockdowns to deal Fabio Wardley a brutal and bloody first defeat as a professional and take the World Boxing Organisation's WBO World Heavyweight title in a thunderous all-British clash in Manchester. United Kingdom referee Howard Foster finally stepped in at the start of the 11th round to signal the end of the fight at the Co-op Live Arena on Saturday. Wardley was bleeding heavily from the bridge of the nose, with his right eye almost closed.
Banu. At least 15 police personnel were martyred on Saturday night after a suicide attack on the Pehel police post in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa's Banu district. The terrorists launched their attack on the post by ramming a vehicle laden with explosives.
As Washington pressures Taiwan to spend big on defences against a potential Chinese attack, one of the island's most outspoken politicians is arguing the opposite approach: less confrontation and more dialogue. Fresh from holding talks with Chinese leader Xi Jinping in Beijing, and days before US President Donald Trump will do the same, the head of Taiwan's largest opposition party told CNN that weapons alone will not keep Taiwan safe.
And the cruise ship at the centre of the hantavirus outbreak has arrived at the Spanish island of Tenerife, where its 147 passengers are expected to disembark in a carefully managed repatriation operation involving multiple nations. MV Hondius will anchor at the port of Granadilla in the Canary Islands, and the passengers will be evacuated to their home countries after tests to confirm they remain without symptoms, officials said. And Russian President Vladimir Putin has suggested that his country's war on Ukraine may be coming to an end, and expressed a willingness to meet his Ukrainian counterpart, Volodymyr Zelensky, in a third country if a peace deal is finalized. Putin made the comments to reporters on Saturday, hours after promising victory in Ukraine at Russia's most scaled-back Victory Day parade in years.
Brain imaging studies are revealing a disturbing reality. Pakistani children raised in unstable or violent homes may develop brain patterns similar to soldiers returning from combat. What makes the findings more alarming is that none of the affected children had been diagnosed with a mental disorder. Externally, they appeared healthy. Neurologically, however, their brains were already operating in a constant state of vigilance, as if preparing for danger at any moment.
IT is one of the enduring ironies in South Asia that even after stepping back from the brink of a potentially disastrous confrontation in May last year, India and Pakistan have been unable to move towards a meaningful dialogue. When announcing the ceasefire on May 10, US President Donald Trump congratulated both countries for showing common sense and great intelligence. Soon afterward, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated that Islamabad and New Delhi had agreed to begin talks on a broad set of issues at a neutral site. Yet 1 year later, those promised talks remain elusive. The brief triumph of pragmatism quickly gave way to familiar mistrust, hardened political positions, and strategic posturing. More strikingly, the international actors who had facilitated the ceasefire, including the US itself, showed little interest in converting crisis management into a structured peace process. The outcome is that on the anniversary of last year's standoff, defense superiority is being projected by both countries through a verbal war. The IMF's approval of the latest review of Pakistan's ongoing fund program comes at a moment of growing global economic volatility. With the Middle East crisis disrupting energy markets, its timing is particularly significant for a country whose external position remains vulnerable to imported energy shocks. For Pakistan, whose balance of payments position depends heavily on external financing and remittance stability, the new tranche offers some respite. The approval of the review was not in doubt. It was just a matter of time, as Islamabad remains broadly on track under the program. However, it did not come automatically. The government reportedly accepted a dozen new conditions, pledging adherence to pre-war targets to keep economic stabilization efforts on track. A year after the 4-day military confrontation between India and Pakistan, It is time for introspection to develop a better understanding of what led India to commit this blatant act of aggression and to draw lessons that can be applied to handling future crises of this sort. First, let's figure out why India attacked several non-military sites in Pakistan on May 7, killing 31 civilians. Prima facie, it wanted to avenge the April 22 terrorist attack on tourists in Pahalgam in Indian-occupied Kashmir. In a knee-jerk reaction, India blamed Pakistan. The latter condemned the incident and called for an impartial investigation. India expected the world to accept its allegations against Pakistan, with no questions asked. But to its surprise, not one country endorsed its allegations. For over 2 decades since 9/11, India has sold a flawed narrative to the world that Pakistan was the epicenter of terrorism. That lie now stood exposed.
US authorities are investigating the cause of an explosion on board a boat that injured 11 people in Miami, southern Florida. Miami-Dade Fire Rescue Battalion Chief Juan Arias told reporters that emergency crews responded to reports of a possible boat explosion at Haulover Sandbar, a popular tourist location.
The week of May 6, May 10 marks the first anniversary of the 5-day military conflict between Pakistan and India. The conflict was sparked by the April 22 Pahalgam attack on tourists in India-occupied Kashmir, which New Delhi, without evidence, linked to Pakistan.
A ceremony to mark 1 year since Pakistan's victory in last year's conflict with India is underway at General Headquarters GHQ in Rawalpindi. The conflict with India, starting from the April 20 Sukan Pahalgam attack to the end of Operation Bunyanam Mahsus, with a ceasefire between the two countries on May 10, has been called Marka-i Haq, Battle of Truth, by the state.